Welcome back. Welcome back to the channel, and most importantly, to each a good day. Well, where we left off, you can see we're back on our 2018 all-wheel drive Charger, aka our retired police vehicle. And this is after we've had a chance to kind of go in and clean it up and dealing with a little bit of low light conditions. I apologize. It's going to be a little bit hard to kind of see all this on camera, but you can see all this looks much better. We got rid of as much of the dirt as we could. We got about 7 hours into cleaning this vehicle, both external and internal. Now we got a little bit of residue that you may or may not be able to see on camera. You can kind of see it when you get close to the door, and you can feel it a little bit. It's just residual adhesive from the decals that used to be on the side, but we did get the majority of it. And for the large chunks of adhesive that was left, actually some just 91% rubbing alcohol actually did a really good job of removing a lot of this adhesive. But as you can see, we got a lot of the black soot and tree sap and a lot of the other items that were just kind of caked into every crevice. Did a pretty good job of getting all that out. And you can see from the internal here, we did a pretty good job of, we've got a couple more spots. It looks like I got to go back over and kind of get the rest of this mud out of here, but this is the textured surface, so it's a little bit of a pain to clean, but not impossible. But it does look tremendously better in here than it did before. Let's go ahead and take a look at the front. If the camera's picking up the wind, I apologize. It's getting a little bit windy out here right now as we get into the evening hours. So you can see we got the floorboards cleaned up. I did a pretty good job of cleaning the seats out, the center console, the passenger seat. And I actually was able to track down, you can hopefully see the make of this center console is put up by Automotive. Automotive makes the center console. Automotive also makes the barrier that you see here that separates the individuals in the back from the officers up front. They also make that one-piece seat that you saw in the back. That one-piece seat is actually called I think it's called a Bio Shield or Bio Guard, if I remember correctly. And of course, this is also sold as a separate piece. This is a separate piece, and pretty much everything in the back seat is sold as individual pieces, to include the door panels you see here on the side and the bars in the window. But we were able to order this 4-inch wide blank plate that we can put up here and just to kind of help cover this hole up. While we're at it, you'll notice the cup over here has a broken hold down point, and we were able to order another one of these as well. So we have this on the way, and we've got this on the way. Now, again, like I mentioned before, we're going to have to pull this out of here eventually, because we want to get to that wiring underneath and kind of remove what we don't need anymore at this point. As well as, again, the purpose is to go through here and remove all the extra added aftermarket wiring that we're not going to use, because it'll help us out tremendously when we start our electrical troubleshooting to make sure that the issues that we're currently having isn't related to maybe just some bare wiring that got left behind when they removed all the equipment. And the door cards, the replacement door panels came in that I told you about in the last video. We'll get those installed here eventually. But what I want to show you is part of the wiring that we've kind of uncovered already. And if we go back here, this is kind of where we're going to start our crusade. Now this is the passenger side behind the side covering, and it was where, if you remember from the previous video, that big old power connection going into, I'm sorry, I'm blinding you with the light, that going into that 80 amp fuse that you see right down there, nestled in there, that was feeding this additional sub fuse panel you see right here. And you can see they have numerous power taps coming off of that. So they were running, it looks like, again, it looks to be a piece of 1-aught 1-gauge battery cable into an 80 amp fuse, from that fuse into this distribution block here. And this is supposed to be here. This is the factory Mopar one. This has to do with the park assist when you're in reverse. This one is aftermarket, so this is aftermarket install, and these relays that you see down here are all aftermarket. Now you see what we've got wiring here, where it looks like they took one lead of this connector here, looped it into their harness, and we've got some aftermarket wiring here to sort through. You could see this yellow wire that's connected to that tap there. I'll tell you what, let me just get the light out of the way so stop blinding you. But this is the one that was plugged into an unused fuse area, and you could see it looks like they actually just cut a fuse in half and used the bladed section to make their connection. Again, I'm not here to shame anyone or anything, but there are better ways of doing this type of a tap, not this way. Just my opinion. But you can see that tap, this yellow line goes over here, gets crimped into this line here, and then continues to go further on. So we need to kind of trace that down. Coming back to some of this wiring, which again, piece of this is tied into this rear tail light here. You can see we got more of it that kind of comes along here and goes in behind this side piece, so we need to get that piece out. And then we need to see about pulling the flooring up. You saw this in the last video, but you can see that there's another one of these nice big reasonably heavy gauged battery taps that's going off this direction, and of course something that right here that pretty good. Now again, another pretty good size gauge of cables that somebody cut and left laying there. Now if you're familiar with these vehicles, and let me get you some light, eventually what we will do, as you can see it right there, that's the infamous star connection, the white and the green. And just like in the sister models for the Challengers, we actually have a kit from the Automotive that we will eventually install that will tap into here, and what that will give us is a AWD port that will have full unrestricted access to the vehicle. So we'll be able to do the tunes, modifications, things of that nature without having to constantly either unplug the secure gateway or remove the secure gateway. But that'll be coming in a future video. And yeah, you can see the wiring actually goes behind this piece, which is again part of that bio shield or bio seat that we're gonna have to take out. So that's where it looks right now, and that's kind of where it starts. We're gonna get some wire cutters in here. We're not gonna cut any of the wiring yet, but we'll go through and start clipping these tie wraps and getting this wiring harness unbundled and figure out what they've got where and where they've made their taps into the factory harness, and see about what we need to do about removing all of this. Again, this is the only module. It's on this, it's behind this cover, fender cover, or I should say rear trunk cover, that needs to stay. The rest of this just needs to go. Now we did also notice this when we were cleaning it. You'll notice there's a lot of water inside this tail light, and you'll see this thing here. I haven't taken this out yet, but it looks like they've actually made a hole and added an additional light. Let me get you some light on there. There we go. You can see it there now. They've actually added an extra light into this lens, and if I had to guess, that's probably their strobe. So when they're running their lights at a particular scene, whether it's a traffic stop or whatever, and they strobe the rear taillights, that's probably how they're doing it. But either way, we've already ordered some aftermarket replacement tail lights that we'll be getting those changed out, because if I had to guess, it's probably the seal on this added light that's leaking. And besides, since we're not going to use this extra light in here anyway, we might as well get some nice, and what we have is some nice LED replacements, so there'll be nice sealed replacements, and that should take care of our water leak. And that is about it for this section. So what I'm going to do is just continue to kind of take things apart here, and then as I get more and more of this exposed, I'll bring you back, and then we'll start kind of putting a game plan together of what we need to do as far as our wiring repairs. So with that being said, I'm gonna pause you and I'll bring you right back. 1 moment. And welcome back. Let me show you where we're at. Went ahead and got this side piece kind of out of the way. You can see more of their wiring. They did the same thing on all 4 of the rear lights. So this light right here, and it probably goes to the side marker light here. You can see that they tapped in to one side of one connector on each of the lights, ran it through here, and if we follow this, it ends up over here plugged into one of these 2 relays. So if I had to guess, and yeah, I'm going to do a lot of guessing on here because obviously I don't have the original wiring diagram that the aftermarket installer would have used for all this, but if I had to guess, since we're looking at a pair of relays here, they probably had the rear lights tapped into, so they could do the wig-wag, which I think it's called, is where you flash, you alternate flashing between left and right. So it looks like they would have had that, which kind of makes sense. Tap into the one light source you need here, or the one conductor you need here to get the light you need, and you just alternate flash them with a relay. So what we'll have to do here is just remove their wiring, like you can see right there and right there, and this one on this side, it happens to be white with an orange stripe. Take their wiring out and basically just splice back in the factory wiring only, and just get rid of the pieces there on the lights. As you can see, we've got the biohazard seat unbolted and pushed forward. I can't quite remove it, and I'll show you why, but we can get it far enough forward to get some decent working room. There was just 4 bolts that held this in, 2 front, 2 rear. But in order to get enough room to swing this forward, to get it out this door, because this door does not open far enough widthwise to pull this seat out. So we would have to either remove the door, one of the doors, left or right, and pull it out that way, which I really don't want to do, or remove some of the armor that you see here for the divider. That would give us the space we need to continue to tilt this forward and get it out. But anyway, like I said, I really don't want to get into removing all this to get this out of here, but we may have to, depending on what our wiring is going to look like. As it looks like, you can see it there, they've got a big old positive and negative line running on our side trim here, and you can see this big old massive battery cable here. That's factory. That ties in the rear distribution point in the trunk with the distribution point that's under the hood. But you can see all of their aftermarket items here. Basically anything that is not bundled up inside the harness, which looks to be, once I get my thumb underneath of it, there we go. It looks to be all of this right here is all their aftermarket, and you can see the factory one, or all the wiring together, it's all still kind of pre-taped. So what we're going to have to do is go through, cut those tie wraps, get that wiring out of there, and then just continue to follow this channel this way up on the passenger side. And I'm sure that a lot of this wiring more than likely ends up inside of that center console. But as you can see, it's not too much to this seat. It's just like an ABS plastic, like biohazard, easy cleanable seat. Because if you can imagine why it needs to be a biohazard seat in the back of a police car, I won't go into details, but you can kind of figure that out on your own. So that's what we're going to do. And back here, I don't know if you saw that, there's that big old cut pair of positive and negative that looks like it's going up here on this side pillar, going up, and it's more than likely probably coming out right here. I would say that's more than likely the wiring to what used to be their light bar on the top. So that's all fine and well. Let me see, we got yet another what looks to be ground or a multi-conductor cable also coming this way. So again, that's all it's going to be. I'm going to continue to tear apart more of this interior, possibly get more of these side panels out of the way so we can get a better idea of what we're looking at, and then just continue to follow our wiring up here on the passenger side. So I'll bring you back as I discover a bit more of this. So one moment. And welcome back. So we're still in the process of tracing down our wiring. See, we got a little bit more of the molding picked up or removed from the passenger side here. And we're just kind of isolating what was added that's not a factory wire, which is this bundle you see here. Now, I thought about this, and one thing we may do is that I may leave this extra power wire in there, because it does look like this does go to the front center console, and since this is already run for us, we got some plans for what's going to go into that center console in the future. So it would be nice to have a power line like this already run. So we may pull the rest of this out of here and then just leave this one in place for future use. But if we follow this all the way over, you can see that we have been pulling through some of the wiring that was already cut from the trunk forward, because they're already cut, wasn't attached to anything. We're just kind of pulling it through as we go. And went ahead and removed the glove box. And again, I didn't show any of that because it's not too terrible to remove the glove box on these. You just squeeze the sides of them and drop them down. But you can see once we pull down this front liner that usually goes underneath the glove box, you can see our start connector just dangling in the breeze. It's supposed to be attached to that clip, which clips the back of the glove box. And generally what happens is, if somebody wants to gain access to the bus to, unfortunately this is what a lot of your thieves do for these vintage chargers, is that what they're doing is popping this off of that clip that's in the back of the glove box, plugging into this to get direct access to the CAN bus, and then they cut another key to your vehicle. So somebody's been in here playing, because this has been popped loose, so we'll make sure that we put that back inside of its proper holder when we go for the reassembly. Again, I'm not going to tap into this myself. We're going to tap into the start connectors in the back and give us a proper OBD plug to then plug into. But this wiring, as you can see, and again, there's that bundle right there coming up through the passenger side. It went up. They had it zip tied all the way across. It comes through here, and maybe you can see it right there in the corner where this center console's at. Oh, excuse me. Comes up into here. All right, one moment. Ooh, we're losing daylight and it's starting to get cold. So I went ahead and removed a bunch more of these panels, as you can see here, just so we can get a better gauge of what's on the inside, and found two more distribution blocks, as you can see, at the back of this center console. And that big positive power wire that we've been chasing is actually right here. And you can see from that, even though it was taped, that is exposed. So that's just been kind of flapping in the breeze. You know, hopefully whatever fuse they've got it tied into back there was doing its job. But that's the main reason why we're taking all this apart, wanting to get all this wiring out of here, because I don't want to troubleshoot any potential electrical gremlins, if they still exist after all of this, while, not knowing the health of what all this looks like. So just in the process of seeing what we need to remove to get this out of here, and it looks like there's 4 bolts in the back, 2 here, you can see they're underneath these distribution blocks, 2 more right there in the back, and then looks like we've got another 2 right here on this plate, and that'll secure the front. And hopefully once we get the front and the back out of here, we'll be good. Now all 3 of these power adapters that you see, they're all wired together via that splice there, which then comes through and it's hooked into one of these distribution points you see here. So I'm not quite sure if I want to keep these yet, to be honest with you. We have the two factory power points right here, which is, I have no problem keeping those. We may, and right now I'm kind of leading towards that, we may just pull this piece out of here altogether and just get us another blank plate like this one and just cover this up. Now we do have some future plans for this, and I'll let you know some of that now. But one of the thoughts is when we finally get our Banks power gauge set up would be to mount the Banks gauges within this enclosure, because it's a nice roomy enclosure, got plenty of room for wiring. So Banks and any other future devices we want to put, we can install within here, which is why it would be useful, again, to keep at least this nice thicker gauge power line. And then what we could potentially do is just utilize one of these power distribution points here in the back for our future power needs, I should say. Either way, that's what we're looking at. So I'm leaning towards, again, just kind of taking this out of here and leaving it out, but we shall see. Right now I just want to get it out of the way so we can get a better idea of what we've got. And you can see there's a laptop power supply dangling right down there. You can see it attached to the side case. I'll just tap it with the light. That looks like, and that would have come out to what looks to be a typical yellow ThinkPad type of laptop power cable. So it looks like that is a DC to DC laptop power supply. If I had to guess, it's just taking 12 volt automotive power and down stepping it for the laptop. This is just the factory cabling here that goes to these factory power ports. I need to get the Uconnect item disconnected, and then disconnect some wiring from our back terminal blocks here, and then we can work on trying to get this console out of here. Yeah, so let me fidget with this, but just want to show you that's what the inside of that looks like. It's plenty roomy, and you know, we found more distribution points. So a little bit more of the rat's nest yet to unravel, so I will get to work on this and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. You can see we got a little further with our disassembly. We've got the console loose at this point. We're just getting the rest of this wiring out of here, which goes to this release right here at the top. I'm not going to tell you what this is for, but obviously you can figure that out because this is a YouTube video. And that wiring that runs to that, in case you're curious, looks to be just two conductors. It had a ground and this pink wire. Now so far I've only had to cut one wire to get this console out of here, and that was the pink one. Now this pink one happens to go all the way back into the trunk. So I assume this is probably a switched 12 volts, if I had to guess. Probably controlled by the computer that would normally sit up here, which would then be tied into one of the relays in the back, which would then release this shackle in case you needed to get the particular item that would sit here out. So I think what we can do, and I went ahead and disconnected the ground lug that you can see down here. They had about half a dozen or so grounds tied into that, and I think with that we can more than likely get this out of here. It's been a lot of cutting, a lot of tie wraps, so I will give it to the individual who did the install. They definitely secured things down quite a bit as far as the wiring. So I'm gonna work on getting the rest of this, getting this console out of here, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. Apologies. You can tell it's getting dark out, so this will probably be the last shot I do for the evening. And I'll have to go do some research, and we'll bring you back and kind of continue what we've got going on here. But as you can see, we've got the center console out. Had to remove a lot more zip ties. We've got some factory wiring harnesses here that had to disconnect to get it around everything to get the console to clear. No harm, no foul. These haven't been altered in any way. That's the power taps needed for those two factory power outlets that are on the side there. And you can see that we do have one factory connector here that looks like it's been tapped into quite a bit. They've got a gray and a purple that are part of the wiring that goes all the way back to the trunk. We'll have to see where those are actually ending up. And you can see where they took several strands, spliced them together, came out with two separate positive feeds or two separate positive legs. And these are the ends that were driving the distribution blocks that were sitting in the back of the console. So they were tapping power off this connector here. So I'm going to need to do some research and figure out what this connector would have originally been used for. It's probably an item that the factory console would have plugged into, because the factory console would have had, obviously, the factory power ports. It would have had some other items in it. It would have also potentially had, if this wasn't the all-wheel drive police model, then the shifter would have actually been down here instead of up on the tree where you see it here. Anyway, I need to figure out what this is, pull some wiring diagrams up, and figure out why they had, again, looks like they bundled those together and pulled a positive leg off, and they bundled those together and pulled another positive leg off. So anyway, that's part of the mystery about figuring out what somebody did behind you and trying to unravel it. And just to reiterate, the reason why we're doing all this is that we want all this cleaned up. We want to know that our electrical system is as unaltered as we can get it before we dump a battery in here and see if the one electrical issue that we know that we do have hopefully resides itself. But if not, then we know that we've gotten all this cleaned up and the issue that we have isn't potentially related to something that was, you know, sitting right here. But that being said, like I said, it's getting kind of hard to see. It's getting kind of late, so I'm going to cut it out for the evening, and I'll bring you back on the next day. Moments for you, but a day for me. So catch you in a bit. And welcome back. Well, it's the evening of the following day. Moments for you, but about a day for me. And just kind of picking up where we left off as far as the tracing down all the aftermarket wiring and getting it removed. I discovered that these were 3 of the wires coming out of the rear trunk. One's a coax cable for an antenna, as you would expect, and the other 2 are just positive, negative power sources. They were actually running out of this piece of trim on the back into here and into the same access hole that normally, if the passenger seat wiring would come through. And when I pulled on them, discovered that they were actually loose and just taped up underneath the flooring here. So they were probably right about in here somewhere, just laying loose underneath. So you can see that we've got a rather large ball of cabling that's now been removed from the back forward. Going back to what we were looking at yesterday and what we removed thus far, is that we were wondering, if you remember, this connector right here, where they grouped together a bunch of wires into a single conductor, 2 of them, 2 single conductors, and used them as power taps and some distribution points that were back here in the center console. And I pulled up and found what you can see there, called the Dodge Charger Pursuit Upfitter's Guide. Now what this is a PDF that you can get from Stellantis, and it gives aftermarket upfitters specs on the vehicle and lets them know about the vSIM device and various other aspects of this charger. And it's more outfitted for aftermarket installers to more easily turn these from the Pursuit that they're known for when they come out of the factory, and to add all of the equipment that the law enforcement officer, for example, should need. One of those connectors that you see right here is the 12-way gray connector. And according to the documentation, that 12-way connector is this connector right here, located underneath the center console per the Outfitter's guide. There's two other ones. There's this connector here, which again is part of the VSIM connector. So this one's a part of VSIM, which is a 12 pin, and you got two 24 pins, which is this one here and this gray one here that they didn't plug into. They didn't use this one. But basically all three of these, this one, once again, this one, this one, this one, are all part of VSIM. But if we look at what they did here on this particular 12 connector pinout, you could see they took pins 1, 2, and 3, which are actually 3 different 20 amp battery positive fused leads, and tied them together into one feed. Then they took the next 3, which is pins 4, 5, and 6, which are all 20 amp relay, basically only come on when either the ignition is in the run or accessory position, and tied those together. And if we look at here, you can see that we've got a, looks to be white with a red stripe, possibly red with a violet, and maybe a violet with a red. Yeah, which kind of lines up to, you know, those 3 there. So that looks like exactly what they did. Now, I'm not sure why, because that would have given you a total of 60 amps just on those 3. And this little piece of wiring right here, which goes to one of those 3, that's one of them, that's the second one. This is not going to handle 60 amps. And maybe they did it for redundancy fashion, in case one of these fuses blew, then the remaining 2 legs would still power the circuit. But either way, that's what they were there for. That's what it's used for. And now that we have what this pinout is in the Upfitter's guide, we can actually use some of the functionality that's inside this VSIM for some future work that we have planned to this vehicle. One such item is the auxiliary switches. Apparently, because of the VSIM, we can control some auxiliary switches through the Uconnect. So we can actually turn on and off certain outputs. We can use those outputs to then drive a relay, and use those relays to basically do other things in the vehicle. So that's going to be the game plan. We're going to kind of keep that knowledge in the back of our head, and look towards possibly using again the auxiliary buttons within the radio to help us drive some features via that VSIM device that's in this vehicle. Anyway, that's the plan. So now that we can kind of have that sorted out, we can look at what they've done with some of their other wiring here and just kind of gauge. And that's that pigtail. This pigtail, you'll see, has a part number on it. You can actually order this pigtail separately, and it's made to plug into that 12-pin connector here. Now, the rest of these are listed as a pass-through that you see here. So only the first 6 were some type of power or switched power, and the remaining 7, pins 7 to 12, you can see are pass-through. So they're for use. You can see there it says extra unused wire for use by Upfitter. Now, according to the Upfitter's guide, the other end of this plug is on the underneath the hood on the passenger side. So we'll take a look for that here in a bit. And you see what they got plugged into this pigtail. So they were using 4 more wires, two of which go into the speaker wire that you see here. 2 more of which go into purple and gray, which all went in towards the back. And then off one of these other VSIM connectors, one of these other 24-pin connectors, this one here, you can see they weren't really using much off this one, with the exception of the 3 pins you see here. And what I'll have to do is just kind of get the book out and figure out what they were tapping into their equipment. But either way, it's also another plug that we don't necessarily need. We don't have to have anything plugged into this one, or this one for just the basic operation of the vehicle. but they are there for, you know, options that we may wire in the future. So I'm going to work on getting more of this stuff disconnected, and I'll bring it back. One moment. And welcome back. So this is where we stand. We've got all that wiring that you saw that was running to the front underneath that console, just kind of pulled all free up here to the back. So the only remaining cable that we have still that goes up to the front is that one power line that we're just going to keep, or I should say power feed, that we're going to keep for now, which is this line right here. And it's not burnt or discolored, that's tar, in case you're wondering. It was laying up underneath here and kind of laid up against this tar area. As you can see, well, actually, let me move that out of the way. You can see a bit of tar there. So what we'll do, again, we've got this disconnected. They had this running into its own. I believe this is like a 60 amp fuse that was in here. It was tapped directly off here, basically making it a direct battery tap. We went ahead and disconnected it. We're not disconnected it, I should say. We're going to go ahead and leave this disconnected again until we're ready to use it. We went ahead and also removed the bigger battery tap that you saw that was going to that. Actually, I got it right here, to that big 80 amp blade fuse that you see here. It was right here, and this is that fuse, and that bigger feed was the one that was powering this distribution block that you see right here. So what we're going to do now is go through and start to remove the other electronics that the rest of this gob of wiring is connected into. The only ones we'll have left are these that you see here, which is a gray cable that goes into this weather boot. This we're going to have to track down. This may be going up front to supply power to something. If I'm just going by the fact they're using red and black, that could mean power. It could mean anything. But it goes down into this weather boot and then just kind of disappears from there. So we'll have to see if we can track down where that's running on the underside of the body. It's not very heavy gauge wire. By the way, we're going to start disconnecting the relays. We've got pictures of all this already, plus plenty of video in case we ever want to go back to it and refer to it for whatever reason. And then we'll have to, as you saw us in the previous clip, do things like splice these wiring harnesses back together to get their jumpers out. We also found that they tapped into another wire that was right above the headliner here inside the trunk, right next to this speaker. And it looks like it's one of the wire pairs that goes up to our trunk. So they could have been monitoring the status of whether this trunk was shut or whether it was locked or unlocked. I'd have to pull the wiring diagram up in order to be sure, but we'll have to do some, again, we'll have to do some harness repair there and get rid of their jumper. This bigger black cable that you see here, pretty good size power line, and it looks like maybe a control signal as well, is the one that actually goes up and is poking out of the top of the hood that you see there. So this one just goes up, follows the body line over, comes over here, hits the pillar behind here, comes up, and eventually makes its way out to here. And you can see that we've got what looks to be about 4 wires in there. It looks like we got a green, a yellow, a red, and a black. And actually what we need to do, which I'll do here in a short, is just put a little dab of RTV on top of this to seal this, just so that water doesn't get down in between where they've got it gooped here, and I don't want water getting inside between these cables and just kind of filling up inside the jacket. Again, I don't see any leaks on the inside, so that's good, but it's not going to hurt, at least for the time being, until we can address this, just to put a little bit more sealant on that. Oh, let's see. So that's what we're going to work on next. Going to work on just getting this disconnected. This harness, since it goes to that top light bar, will just kind of stay wrapped up and just kind of lingering in here, at least for a little while, until we get to that point that we want to address that hole. and then we'll go ahead and pull the remainder of that harness out as well. But that's what we're going to work on next, getting all the relays and the distribution block and what looks to be maybe a 12 volt to 5 volt converter, judging by the number of wires and the color of those wires over here, plus it's hooked up to a heat sink, or that is a voltage regulator. But if I had to guess, I bet you that is a 12 volt to 5 volt converter. But anyway, let me work on getting some more of this aftermarket stuff out of here, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we're at the front of the vehicle at this point, and what I was in the process of tracing down was, if you remember on our VSIM connector, there's a comment in the Upfitter's guide talking about these connectors here, these pass-throughs. The other side of at least these pass-through, this 7 to 12, is supposed to be on the passenger side, next to somewhere in here. And based on the color codes and the number of pins, we found it. It was actually tucked up kind of within here next to this pull bar. And they had a plug plugged into it, and it looks like they were using a couple of these pins to at least signal and control the lights from out here, which makes sense based on how they had it tapped into the harness and such. So we're in the process of right now just kind of shoving this back in through here to see if we can get this pulled back through, and at least on the other side of this engine compartment. It's actually this right here. Now, somebody did add their own ground into that connector, which runs into a little terminal right here. So we'll just need to kind of, I mean, I'll leave it for now because we're not going to use it, but more importantly, I just want that out of the elements and make sure that end isn't contacting anything it's not supposed to. Because again, it does, I don't know, it really shouldn't make a difference, to be honest with you, if it truly is just to pass through from that connector. But it's still a good idea to get these covered and secured, just so that water and other grime doesn't continue to accumulate in them. So what I'm going to do is continue to try to push this through the grill and see if I can fish it back out from, it looks like they've got it running kind of around the side of the, it'll be hard to show you, kind of running around the side of the radiator here on the passenger side. We'll see if we can get that pushed through, and we'll go on to the next piece. So one moment. And welcome back. So I went ahead and just removed the connector that was on there. This just looks to be a custom connector that they put on when they attach the lights. And I say that because now that we've got the harness out, if you see, there are two unused wires that are looped back and wrapped in back into the factory harness. So what they would have done originally for all 6 of these, minus this ground wire obviously, because this one was added on, but what they would have done for all 6 of these is they would have covered them over, much like these two being unused, and kind of tucked them up over here in the passenger side of the body. So since I'm not really worried about using their custom connector, we're going to do the same thing with these. We're just going to put a little bit of shrink tubing on that, shrink it up, wrap it all good with electrical tape, and then we'll find a spot to kind of stash it over here on the passenger side somewhere where it would normally sit from the factory. We'll probably, actually, just be honest with you, coil it up and probably zip tie it right here to this bracket, so that way we know we at least have connectivity or pre-run wiring from the inside center console to out here in the vehicle, and we can actually use that wiring for anything that we like. So that'll be a nice added bonus should we find the need that we need to run some wiring out here to help save us some time in the future. So I'm going to get this buttoned up now that this is out of there, and if I'm not mistaken, other than what we have in the rear, that should be the last of the aftermarket. Well, actually, that piece wasn't aftermarket, but we wanted to get it removed anyway and kind of tucked out of the way. But what you can see down there on the ground is the aftermath of everything that was pulled off and removed that either used to be installed in this cavity here on the passenger side or run up to the front of the vehicle. So now all we have at this point is going through it, and this is the wiring harness I was telling you about that goes to that top light bar, and we did put a little bit extra silicone on that just to help seal this up, as you can kind of see here. Yes, and what was happening is what I thought happened. The minute we actually put this downward, and which is the reason why it's looped back up here, is that if it goes down like that, this wiring harness is actually full of water. So we're going to have to drain this harness out. So yeah, it was a little bit exposed up there, and water was filling up the inside of the jacket, but that's kind of to be expected. So what we have left at this point is cutting the rest of their jumper wiring out, doing a couple harness repairs. Looks like we've got about 2, 4, 6 at least connections to repair back here in the trunk. And then we'll be able to kind of go on from there and potentially just reassemble things well enough to put a battery in here and do some testing and see if we still have our electrical issues that we were having before. So with that being said, again, we're losing our light for the day. It's a lot warmer today than it was yesterday, thankfully. So what I think I will do is actually just kind of pack all this up for the evening, get all this picked up and squared away, and then tomorrow we'll come out here and we'll look into starting some wiring repairs. I'll bring you in and show you what those repairs look like once they're done. It's just going to be a little bit of soldering work, and yes, I'm going to use some soldering here because this is just internal and the soldering will hold it just fine. Some individuals prefer to use these little butt connectors right there. You can use those if you got them. I do use them on occasion. I may or may not use them, to be honest with you. I do have some that have the sealant on it, but either way, I'll kind of bring you back and show you what we decided to do in that aspect. Now, I probably won't show you the soldering. I've showed that before a little bit on this channel, and it's kind of always one of those controversial topics, especially on YouTube, because if you ever want to start a comment war on the bottom of the video, talk about either welding, soldering, and I'm trying to remember, I'm drawing a blank on what the third one is, but welding and soldering both will definitely spark some debate. But either way, I'll bring you back. I'll show you what that looks like when that's done, when we got the rest of the factory wiring out of here. So it'll be a moment for you, and probably it'll be the next day or so for me. So one moment. And welcome back. Well, it's been a few days for me, but a few moments for you since the last section of the video. And we're going to get started on the wiring repair here. And you can see on this passenger side taillight, where in the previous segment, this one wire here is what they tapped into. Again, more than likely to either control this light or to alternate flash this light between left and right hand side. But we've gotten their wiring out. We've got the factory wiring stripped back, and there's enough slack in this cable that we don't have to worry about adding a piece of wire in here to join this. But as I commented on earlier, I'm just going to solder this and put a piece of heat shrink tubing on it that has the adhesive in it. Now, there are several different ways you can do this, and I know some would prefer to crimp on the little metal butt connector and then put a piece of adhesive heat shrink on it. You can also get several different types of self-soldering connectors. You can get the butt splices that have the adhesive that don't use solder, and so on and so forth. But again, like I said, we just got a little bit of flux down here, and I ordered this flux years ago. More flux than I'll probably need in my entire life, and I still have it years later. We're just using standard solder, tin/lead solder, the good old-fashioned 1040 type solder. And yes, you can still get it. And I know they make a lead-free silver version, but for the I believe this is the 6040. Yeah, this is the tin and the lead. I prefer the good old-fashioned 6040 stuff when it comes to electronics. Yeah, I'm a bit older, but that's just kind of my preference. And you've seen this on the channel before. There's our variable I think that's a T12, as you can see, variant type station. And of course, just a box of the adhesive lined heat shrink. And I'll put links to the various bits and pieces in the description box below the video. And when you get in this heat shrink offline, if you're looking for the adhesive line stuff, just be careful with the stuff that you're getting. I'm finding, and I've had this happen to me, a lot of that heat shrink is listed as being adhesive lined, and then when you get it in and heat it up, it's not. A good way I found to do it is just to take one of the medium-sized pieces, because it's easier to see. Just slice it in half so you can peel back and see the inside of it, and you can tell from looking at the lining on the inside of the heat shrink whether it's got the adhesive in it or not. So far, and I did that test with this one, so far this stuff looks pretty good. Again, it's just one of those generic sets that you can get, but just be careful when you're buying the generic stuff, like I said. So what we're going to continue to do is work on this piece. I'm going to get this all soldered up, connected. I'll bring it back and kind of show you what that looks like, and then we're going to repeat the process for the remaining wires in this trunk, just like this one below that you saw earlier, where they've tapped into that wiring feed. And of course, let's not forget about the one that's underneath the headliner here that goes to the trunk wiring. And also, what I wanted to show you, this is what we're using for a heat gun. You don't have to use this specific one if you got one of the bigger ones, as long as you're careful with it. This one is a little bit more on the pricey side of it, but it's perfect for doing the electronic stuff like this. You don't get too much heat, you don't get too little heat, and it does come with the assortment of adapters for the end of the heat gun. And yep, you're seeing one of the supervisors that have just showed up right now to kind of keep progress on what we're doing for our job here. And this is what I also wanted to show you. These are these solderless ones that you've probably seen online in several videos. They also contain the adhesive. Some people like them, some people hate them, some people have a love-hate relationship with these. And these are just the manual butt connector crimps that also contain the adhesive. So just to show you, there are options out there. Again, I'm choosing just to go to solder route with a little bit of heat shrink. It's just my preference, but it kind of comes down to exactly your preference and kind of what you're doing, which may dictate what you like to use. Yeah, and I'm not looking to spark a debate in the comments below. But I'm going to get this one patched up. I'll bring it back. I'll show you what it looks like, and then we'll carry on with the remainder. So one moment. And welcome back. So just want to show you what we got here. We've got all the patches done for what we had here in the trunk. Coming back to this one real quick. If you remember when we took all the equipment out of here, we had this one just kind of laying here. And it was going into the boot here on the passenger side for where the wiring goes underneath for the sensors and the side marker light there on the passenger side. Well, I found out where that one was going. It actually didn't go anywhere. You could see they cut the end off of that one. Where it actually was going, it was tie wrapped up underneath the rear center of the bumper here. So I just cut one tie wrap and was able to finally pull this piece of leftover wiring out of there. So that one's gone. So just to show you, you can see our first patch here. We've got the heat shrink on it. We've got it all soldered up, got it all heat shrinked. And for some of these, like you see this one down here, when they tapped into the harness, they did cut it a bit short when I removed their wiring. So we did have to put a little bit of a jumper in here. And don't worry, those areas where I had to undo the tape to get a bit more slack, I'm going to come in here with some fabric tape and re-tape and re-secure our loom. You can see we got our patch done. Let's see, yeah, you can see that. You can see we got our patch done for our center bar light. I thought that actually went to the trunk controls, but judging by the color code, it looks like it goes to the light bar in the center of the trunk. And you can see our other patch here on the driver's side for the rear tail light, and our patch down there, which again goes to the side marker on the rear fender on the driver's side. But the nice thing is, all of these patches or jumpers that they put in here when they tapped into the harness are out. Now, one thing we could have easily done, and I'm sure you're probably screaming at the camera or screaming at the video right now, is that if that's where they tapped in, we could have very easily just kind of cut their harness here, took these splades off, and just spliced these two wires back together, and that would have completed our circuit. And we very easily could have done that, and that is an option. However, I just wanted all of their old, shouldn't say old, but I just wanted all of their wiring out of here so I can try to revert this back to as much as factory as possible. So we got one area of, I don't really call it wiring, it's more securing, which is up in the trunk area on the passenger side, where the wiring comes out from the center console to where that big pull bar was at, where they had the lights mounted. So we just want to get that re-secured, get a little bit of a loom on it, some loom tape, just to make sure that doesn't brush up against something that shouldn't. Not that it's a huge deal, it's not going to short, because it goes to right now an unused connector that used to be underneath the center console. But anyway, we just want to get it dressed up. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of that, and then I'll bring it back. And like I said, off camera, I'll get all this taped up, get it re-secured. But like I said, it works. It does take a little bit longer to solder connections together like this and put a piece of heat shrink on it versus using like a butt splice that also has a sealant in it. But again, it's your preference. It's just my preference for doing small wiring like this to go ahead and solder it. It should be fine. But however, if one of these does develop some type of issue or crack apart or break or anything of that nature, I will definitely let you know about it. But let me get to work on a bit more wiring, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we're at the front, as we were talking about earlier, just taking care of this little bit of wiring harness, and all we're doing is putting some heat shrink on it, heating them up, and then while it's still hot, just pinching the end shut, and then that'll do a pretty good job of sealing it up and, you know, keeping any debris, water, things of that nature out of that wiring, and also keep it from wicking down into the wire. But again, this is the 6 conductor piece that actually goes to one of the connectors that's underneath the center console. And what it is, it's part of that Upfitter's package for when they make a pursuit vehicle into a police vehicle. And in this case, they were using some of those wires to come out here and actually control the lights that would normally be on the light bar, normally be on this pull bar up front. So the nice thing is, like we were talking about earlier, we have a nice 6 conductor factory ran bit of cable here, so in the event that we have something on the inside of the vehicle that we need to wire to the outside, we can just kind of shortcut the process a little bit and, you know, use what the factory already provided. But what we're going to do next is just get this in some loom tape, and I think what we're going to do is just kind of maybe just tie wrap it right here to this little unused eyelet here on the fender, and that'll kind of keep it out of the way. Now, we did go through, as you can see, I need to put the nut back on, but you'll see that ground connection right there where they ran their own independent ground on that stud out here to this bar. We went ahead and removed it. Again, we don't really need it for anything, plus it's just one more non-factory wire that we kind of get out of here for the time being. So I'm going to finish up this and I'll bring you back in a moment. And welcome back. So you can see we've got our wiring squared away here. Went ahead and just wrapped a little bit of a fresh loom around that just to help protect it. You can see we just coiled it there, and just coiled it there, I should say, and just secured it with a tie wrap. So that's now out of the way and good to go. Now on the back here, since we're cleaning up our wiring, and just to show you, there we go. Let's get some light in here. We just took a little bit of fabric tape, just a standard loom type fabric tape, and just looped it around each area where we made a repair, just giving that repair some additional support. And while we're back here cleaning our wiring up, I went ahead and just took the rear taillights out. If you remember in the previous video, we covered the fact that the passenger one over here was actually filling full of water. And you can see it right there. You may be able to hear that. And it's actually, you know, full of enough water you can hear it sloshing around. And I think what's happening, just like we looked at before, looks like they put potentially, I would say this is probably going to be a strobe. We'll take it out of here later. but the water actually runs down this side of it, because it would be on this side of the trunk, and it's probably just running down, getting into this seal and filling full of water. So what we went ahead and did is, we may have talked about this earlier, is that we picked up a set of these. Now these are aftermarket LED ones, but they look really good in comparison to the factory ones, other than obviously, again, these are LED versus what I think what comes in this one from the factory is incandescent. Don't quote me on that one, but I believe they're incandescent. These actually may be, strike that. I think these are LED, because it doesn't look like there's a way to take the bulbs out of here to replace it. So that would explain it as well. I originally was going to get a set of factory ones on here, but the factory replacement cost on these, wow, let's just say they're actually quite expensive versus these here. So we'll give these a shot. Now I'll put a link in the description to where I got these online, and obviously if they work good, we'll keep them, and you know, if they start to give us issues, we'll cover that as well. But again, since we're back here cleaning our wiring up, we went ahead and popped those out, clean this area behind it, and then we'll go ahead and get these installed. There's not much to it. It's just the two screws you see here, top and bottom. That little joint piece, or little ball piece there, just snaps into this little rubber grommet here in the back, and you just make your one electrical connection and you're done. So I'm going to get these in, and I'll bring you back in one moment. And welcome back. So just to recap here, you can see that we've gotten this wiring harness taken care of. We wrapped it with a little bit of loom just for some extra protection, and kind of zip tied it again to the unused lug there. So that's now been secured, it's been capped off, it's been sealed, and it's ready for future use should we need it. And you'll see the section of battery tray sitting down here getting a little bit of paint. I'll explain why. We finished getting those rear lights in that we were talking about earlier, so those are done. And you'll notice that, again, like you saw, the battery tray has been taken out at this point. While we were in here cleaning up our wiring that we were looking at earlier, we took advantage and taken the battery tray out, and while it was out, just kind of cleaned up all the dirt and grime underneath of it. A bunch of wire clippings, zip ties, things of that nature that had kind of ended up underneath. But the reason why we took it out, and you saw one side of it being repainted, was because of this vent tube right here. Whoever put the battery in here last did not plug in this vent tube. Now on this particular setup, what happens is the battery, when you put in, you usually plug up this side of the vent, and on this side of the battery you plug in this vent tube. And what that does is, since you're in an enclosed space, and batteries when they charge will produce gases, at least the lead acid kind, this is to vent that to the outside so it doesn't accumulate in here in the trunk. And what had happened is, without this vent being plugged in, that metal bracket that makes up that part of that battery tray, the gases, since they are corrosive, started to eat through the paint and started to rust out the metal. Now the other thing is, and I've looked at it, I don't see any damage to the wiring, but that could also be very bad to our wiring as well long term. So while we had the tray out, sanding it down and painting it, we went ahead and just cleaned up underneath of it, and like I said, got all the debris and stuff out of the way. Now since we were kind of painting things up, and as you saw, removed all the third-party electrical that was here, because all those relays and all those modules you saw in the previous shots, they used self-tappers into this internal plate here. So we went and shot that, as you can see, with some more blue enamel, just to help cover up these holes here where they have exposed metal from using those self-tappers. We just want to kind of inhibit rust at this point. So what we're going to do is let this dry, and then once that dries, in the next video, because I think this one's gone on long enough, then we'll get the battery in here and see if we still have our electrical gremlin. But this video did jump around quite a bit. I apologize for that. But just wanted to kind of take you along and show you, at least in this case, some of the stuff we're having to go through, A, because it's an auction vehicle, and B, because it was used for third-party purposes. You saw all that extra wiring and everything that we wanted to either get disconnected or get removed. because when we go to start this and kind of check things out, if we still have the electrical issue we did when they dropped it off, we now know it's not related, at least, to anything that was put in third party. So again, painted, we're letting that dry just to help to prohibit any rust that may come up now that those self tappers are out. Pulled this out, cleaned it up since we had to take it out to go ahead and sand it and paint it. Also, we noticed that whoever had this out last didn't secure this side of the fuse box to that. It actually clips to this side of the battery holder. It only had one clip in instead of both. That's minor, but it's still something somebody missed. But just to show you that battery tray. So this is what had happened. It would sit in here like this. But this is be the side that would be facing where that vent tube should plug in. And without it being plugged in, those gases just ate away at the paint and then started working its way into the metal. So you can see that we kind of went through and sanded down the rust as best we can and just gave it a couple layers of enamel, and that should hopefully stop the rust right there. Like I said, it was minor and it was worth saving, because these trays, I haven't seen where you can buy this piece by itself. The battery trays come as an entire assembly. So you get the bottom piece, you get this strap, and unfortunately they're not cheap. They go anywhere between about $250 to $300+ for that replacement tray. So it was worth us taking a little bit of time and painting that one and saving it. But with that being said, like I said earlier, this video's jumped around quite a bit, but I wanted to, again, bring you along and kind of show you just some of the things that you may have to go through. Like I said, I'm not saying all auction vehicles are this way, but it's just something to keep in the back of your mind, especially when you pick up a vehicle like this and you know it's been used for, you know, other third-party purposes. But I'll go ahead and cut this video, and in the next one we'll get the electrical system right here. We'll get this finished, tidied up, get everything reinstalled, and then we'll drop a battery in it and we'll start doing some troubleshooting and do some monitoring and see if our electrical issue that it had when it was dropped off is still there, or if it's been remedied. Words are hard. See if it's still there, or if we've taken care of it. But with that being said, I will let you go. If you have not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. It does help out. And with that being said, I will let you go, and I'll bring you back for the next one. Thank you much. Bye.